These days, it can be hard to trust the media. What's true, what's fake, and who is behind the message? I'm a freelance journalist and videographer who has spent years studying the media. Now I'm taking a look at what local, regional, and national news stories mean to us here in North Central Washington. I'm Dominick Bonny, and this is Common Sense. Hello and welcome to Common Sense. I'm Dominick Bonny, and today we're going to be learning about Danica Taylor, who since 2017 battled pediatric brain cancer. Her mother, Audrey, started a social media account to share Danica's story, calling it Danica the Brave, and the account quickly gained followers, ballooning up to nearly 25,000 people who wanted to give Danica their love and support from near and far. My wife and I both followed Danica's battle and were rooting for her and the Taylor family the whole time. Sadly, Danica lost her battle, and on March 11th, she passed away. She was just 5 years old, just 5, yet over the course of those 5 short years, she had to endure 25 invasive surgeries. After some time had passed, I reached out to Audrey to see if she would like to be a guest on this show and share Danica's story, as well as what she wants the public to know about her family's experience, as well as pediatric cancer or anything else she'd like to speak on. She said yes, and so I recently visited the Taylor home, and we sat on their porch and talked about Danica, her fight against the cruelest of enemies, pediatric cancer, as well as what the future holds for their family. Audrey is currently pregnant, and she's due with a little baby girl. Let's jump right into that interview and learn more about Danica the Brave. When and where was she born, and what was she like when she was a baby?
Yeah. Well, we lived in Alaska when she was born, and because there are no doctors where we live, we had to travel, and my family's from Brewster, so we traveled down here by ferry and gave birth at Confluence Health. Both my other kids were born here as well, even though neither time I lived here, but I don't recommend the Mary and Joseph trek, giving birth that way. It was hard.
Sure.
It was kind of a disastrous trip, but so she was born here, but she's from Alaska, and now we live here. But we didn't know she was a girl when she was born. We were Team Green for the first 2 kids, and I was so glad it was a girl, and I also was glad to be right, which I've been right for all of my kids.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I know too much.
Yeah.
Well, she was curious and sweet and spicy and loud. She did what everybody called the screaming eagle. You couldn't get her to stop screaming. And,
Really?
but as she grew, she was, a lot of people would call their children special, but for me, Danica's like a unicorn. And everybody says unicorn, it's not even unique anymore. But what I mean by that is that when she came to me, it's like a unicorn would come to you and nuzzle their head against you, and the whole time you're thinking, don't do anything, just be cool. Just be cool, because she's special, And, she didn't stay around.
Yeah, tell me about when did you first think there was something wrong? How did you find out about her illness?
Well, you can see in hindsight, but it just didn't look like you'd think it would. I thought it was teething. She normally slept through the night. She was 21 months old when she was finally diagnosed, but a couple months before that, she just woke up. I'm like, gosh, girl, what are you doing to me? Go to bed. But thankfully, I told Matt the other day that I was really glad that I didn't just say, go back to bed.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, her teeth must hurt. So I brought her out. We watched movies while she had a popsicle, and I snuggled her. It began to happen more, but we came down here to visit family, and I was driving Matt to the airport so he could go back to Alaska. He was working on rebuilding a bridge at the time. And Danica was able to clearly say, my head hurts, and she was doing this. So I was like, well, gosh, I guess she still has an ear infection because brother had one, and then she had one. And so I took her to this clinic. They're like, oh, well, you traveled 2,000 miles over mountains and things, so she's got some fluid in her ears, probably it'll go away. And it didn't. So I kept taking her back. And one day she just woke up and just started screaming. She didn't stop for 20 minutes. And I just said, Mom, I need you to take Gus. I'm taking her to the clinic. So I took her to another clinic, which in hindsight, I wish that I had stayed with the same provider. It doesn't matter who it is, just someone who can see the, and I changed it for various reasons. I didn't think that she could manage the half-hour or the hour-long drive. So anyway, they did a chest x-ray. Don't know why. Nothing wrong with her chest. And so it just began to get really bad. Really bad. And nobody understood it the way I did because nobody else was there at 1 o'clock in the morning to 4:30 in the morning when she would wake up and scream hysterically. So after, turning all the stones, there was only one more stone to turn, and that was to do an MRI. And they took her back, and we waited and waited. It was an unusually long time. And then who came out was the anesthesiologist, which was a strange choice, I thought, to tell me whatever. But the radiologist was very young. And the anesthesiologist had a very nice face. And that very nice face said, I'm so sorry, but we did find a very large mass in her brain. And he was so sweet about it. And my sister texted my husband in Alaska, and she just wrote, get on a plane, it's a tumor. And then she wrote back to correct her spelling. Oh. I said, you what? Call him. Yeah. He actually was very pleased with that. It was matter of fact for him.
Really?
Yes.
Because you guys were probably fearing something like that.
Well, he said he knew. And, I think we both had different ideas about the inklings we knew. Yeah. And I knew that we, going to all those doctor's visits, that we were just doing paperwork, like establishing a history so that somebody would be like, okay, there's a big problem here. But, the last test we did was a hearing test. And the lady said, congratulations, her hearing is perfect. And I was like, doesn't feel as good as you would think. So I marched her across the street to the pediatrician's office, and I said, I know we don't have an appointment, it's the day after Thanksgiving, but we did the last test, and she's still hysterical, and I really need to see a doctor. And he worked, they worked together to get an MRI that day. Wow. Yeah, and the next day they admitted us immediately, and I had stopped giving her Tylenol because I just figured, gosh, it's not even working, which of course it wasn't. Yeah. And they started giving her Oxy, and I was like, well, now I feel like a jerk. I could have at least given her Tylenol. Yeah. Who would know? Yeah. Anyway, so the next day we were at Seattle Children's Hospital.
Wow.
Yeah.
And from there, what happened?
Well, all my siblings were there to meet me, which was invaluable. And the neurosurgeon told us that they were going to go in and remove it, which I started crying with relief because I didn't even know if it was operable at that point. Yeah. So they did that. It was a 7-hour surgery. It was a golf ball-sized lesion. And then they told us the diagnosis, which was even worse, which was atypical teratoid rhabdoid tumor. And that is a pediatric baby brain cancer. It usually hits children under the age of 3. It's very aggressive, and the survival rate is about 30%. And it really just depends on who you're talking to on what the survival rate is. So I think he told us 50%, but it's not.
So they did surgery.
Yeah, they did.
And then after that, was there chemo and treatments?
Yeah. I think about 8 days after her surgery, they wanted to give her time to heal a little bit. And then they started 6 months of chemotherapy. So we had 6 different cycles, including 3 stem cell transplants. And they did that because her body Well, the treatment's so strong that it knocks everything out, and it's not going to come back for 30 to 50 days, and in that time, you might die.
Right.
You might die of a regular infection. It could be just like you get a paper cut. She got some kind of little scrape. It put her in the hospital. She had like diaper rash that put her in the hospital. She got a stomach bug, put her in the hospital. You know, she had the flu. She did great on that, but that left us alone on Christmas Day. Just Danica and me doing what's called apheresis, where they collect stem cells from her neck or whatever it was. Yeah, it was.
And how did she deal with that treatment, with those treatments?
Well, she was very sick, but one thing about Danica is that she had a better attitude than all of us.
Really?
Oh yeah, she's the one who buoyed us up, and it was her brother who buoyed her up.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that on your Facebook quite a bit, about how much her brother was
Actually, this was them, you know, when she didn't feel good, just watching cartoons together.
Yeah.
And yeah, they would often ride little cars around the hospital together. And they were loud.
Yeah.
And but yeah, him being there, there's something magical that happens when someone visits you in the hospital, you know. It's like you're in the middle of a carousel, and you can see all the painted horses and the children laughing going around, but you're stuck inside. You're behind the mirrored glass. And when you open it, you see a little bit of that. But if somebody comes in, it's like they bring that light in with you. And then your world, which has been at a standstill, it moves again. And it changes you, but it changes them too. And those people are the ones who witness you in your suffering. They get it. And if they don't witness it, you know, it has to be witnessed.
Well, that kind of leads me to that question about, you know, your decision to create the Facebook page and to share her story. What was behind that decision, and what were some of the experiences that came out of that?
Well, initially when Danica was diagnosed, I was very averse to putting anything on the internet. There is such a thing as tragedy porn, and it's not a fun kind of attention. I don't want it. But I didn't have a public Facebook page until the day she completed her treatment. And the reason I started that was because I suddenly realized, oh my gosh, I'm gonna miss all the nurses. They're not supposed to be Facebook friends with you or do phone numbers. And you know, some break the rules, but you don't wanna ask anybody to do that. And to be fair, there's a really good reason for that. Like when you go home from treatment and every little thing, your child's a very sensitive instrument. You know, she falls and suddenly there's a huge bump on her head and it is not swollen, it is brain fluid, and you're like, is that okay? It's not supposed to be right there. You don't want to go ask the nurses that. It's not fair. But I made the Facebook page to keep up with them in a way. And then it changed. It became a thing that was this. The whole thing's very convenient because you don't want to have the same conversation 100 times, and I'm not capable of that. It's too hard. It is too hard to repeat everything. And
to family and
friends. And people are afraid to ask questions, but they want to know, or worse, people will assume things. Like when she was in treatment, I got cards saying, "I'm so sorry for your loss." I'm like,
Oh boy.
I certainly hope not.
It's awkward.
Yeah, it is. So it just makes the most sense to do that. But then it became a thing where I realized, oh my gosh, pediatric cancer is considered to be rare, but it's not. It's 1 in 280 kids are diagnosed with cancer by their 18th birthday. It's the 3rd leading cause of death in children after all accidents and teenage suicides. It's the leading cause of death by disease. I feel like the younger you go, the higher the cause of death it is. I can't remember exactly, but I feel like under 15, brain cancer is one of the leading causes of death.
I had no idea.
Yeah, one in, well, brain cancer, brain tumors in particular. It's the most common solid tumor found in kids. And it kills more children than all leukemias combined. That is not to say that leukemia is an easy disease, but that we've done something right with leukemia. A long time ago, Barbara Bush had a little girl that was diagnosed with leukemia when she was 3. And they told her, don't tell anybody, take her home and die.
Whoa.
And yeah, I mean, I'm sure that they were a little nicer about it than that, but she did pass away, and people definitely still do. I had a friend who passed away in high school from it. I watched another little girl like Danica die from it recently, and it's tragic.
Yeah.
But we have made improvements with leukemia from a 0% survival rate to some of them are as high as 95%. There are many that are still really high risk. Some are only as high as 30%. But my point is that we have researched it, and we have found some cures, and we need some for other pediatric cancers too.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, funding is not good for pediatric cancers. So the National Cancer Institute has a budget for cancer research. And 96% of their budget goes to adult cancers, and the other 4% of those public funds are divvied across all pediatric cancers, of which there are hundreds.
Wow.
There are hundreds of types, each with their own molecular biology, and they each require their own treatment.
Right.
I know tons of other cancer families with brain cancer, osteosarcoma, leukemias, and we don't recognize the names of each other's drugs or treatments because they are different. They respond to different things.
Stay tuned after the break.
At Wenatchee Power Sports, we proudly offer the Polaris product line. Polaris builds the highest quality side-by-side in the industry, with off-road capability that's second to none. The Polaris pre-order program allows customers to purchase the vehicle they want without having to select from limited dealer inventory. The Wenatchee Valley has year-round access to some of the best ORV trails in the Northwest. Start your adventure here at Wenatchee Power Sports.
I'm Chuck Dronan, Managing Member at Eplodolin Retirement and Assisted Living. It's been a tough year for all of us, but especially for those working and living in senior care facilities. Over the course of these many difficult months, our staff at Eplodolin has been vigilant in adhering to federal and state guidelines to protect and assure the safety of our residents and their caregivers. If you're in need of assisted living for a loved one, give us a call at Eplodolin. We're here for you.
Are you a take charge kind of person? Consider a career as a health unit coordinator. You'll work to keep health facilities running efficiently by coordinating medical providers, patients, and departments. The Charter College Certificate in Health Unit Coordinator program can get you up to speed on basic patient care, health records management, health and safety procedures, and medical billing. And the 10-month online program includes a computer you keep. Get started at chartercollege.edu, where we work to get you to work.
Hello and welcome back. Let's get right back into my interview with Audrey Taylor, mother of Danica the Brave, whose memory we're honoring and whose story we're sharing in this episode.
I just decided what I'm going to put on her headstone. I haven't gotten around to doing that yet because it's not fun, you know. But we spent a lot of time reading fairy tales before she died. We'd read Sleeping Beauty 3 or 4 times a day, Beauty and the Beast 3 or 4 times a day, and over that time, in preparing for her to leave me, and I hope she wouldn't, but it was clear at that time. I knew how big her tumor was in her head, and I never told anybody exactly how big it was, but if I told anybody, they'd be like, oh my gosh, I don't even know how. But it reminded me of fairy tales. You know, the princess is cursed, and she's supposed to die, but it's mitigated to a long sleep. And then everybody has to partake in that sleep with her. And then in the end, somebody fights evil and he rescues her. And for us as Christians, like, that's very close. That's a lot alike. So I've decided I'm going to put on her headstone, and a forest of roses grew up around the castle where the princess slept, waiting for the day that she would be awakened. And then I'll say, this is not a grave, it's a garden. And I'll put 1 Corinthians 15, which is a verse that talks about, nothing will truly grow unless it, as a seed, first dies and is planted in the ground, and then it comes up differently. That's a verse that I discovered by accident when I was, in tons of distress. What am I going to do? I'm holding my child here, and you're looking for something, and I found that verse, and it is a huge source of comfort for me, because if that isn't true, I don't know how I would get out of bed in the morning. I don't understand. I know that people all over the world don't believe that. But personally, if I did not believe truly that I would see my daughter again, I don't know how I'd get out of bed.
Well, that was going to be my next question is, how has your faith been a part and helped your mental health, your spiritual health? How has that been a part of this journey?
Well, death is just high stakes, isn't it? For me, it's high stakes. If my faith isn't true, then what is the point of all this? I'm suffering a lot. She's suffered a lot. I have my 2 boys and my husband, and I have this baby coming. And those are very important to me, but in terms of my suffering, this would be a mortal blow. So for me, I told Matt yesterday that having faith in this situation that I'm in, it's like being in a turbulent river that is freezing, so cold it takes your breath away. And you are going to be carried away and drown unless something stops it. And for me, when I remember what I believe, remember the truth that Danica is healed in heaven, I will see her again for a very good reason, then it's like, okay, I got a life jacket on, I'm hanging onto a rope. I'm not out of the river. Yeah. It is freezing, I can barely breathe. Am I gonna die? I don't know. But I don't have water going over my mouth. I am sheltered in this little cleft of rock, and I can get through this right now.
As the father of a daughter about to turn 5, I cannot even begin to imagine what the Taylor family has gone through over the course of Danica's battle with brain cancer. Following Danica's story on social media was a constant reminder that no matter what setbacks or struggles I was dealing with, those were trivial and paled in comparison to what Audrey, her husband, their 2 boys, and most of all Danica were dealing with. Recently, my own family was rocked by a bout with cancer. My father-in-law was diagnosed with stomach cancer, and it only took about 5 months from his first diagnosis for that cancer to take him. He was only 60, and after a long career in law enforcement, he was just getting ready to retire. He and my mother-in-law, Maria, thought they had another 20 years or more to enjoy the fruits of their labors together. Needless to say, Maria is still reeling from the loss of her beloved husband, and the whole family is still coping. Because 60 is pretty young to pass away, especially at this day and age. But 5? That's so cruel and intolerable that it kind of takes your breath away when you think about it. It's enough to make you doubt the existence of any God or higher power, let alone a loving and benevolent one. But talking to Audrey, one thing becomes abundantly clear. It's her faith that is comforting and sustaining her, because in that faith is the promise of seeing her little girl once again. Like she said in the interview, if I didn't believe I would see her again, I wouldn't be able to get out of bed in the morning. During our pre-interview and again during our on-camera interview, Audrey and I spoke at length about our society's discomfort with and refusal to really acknowledge and process death. People from past generations and those in other cultures had and have a more healthy relationship with death. That's because people died at home for the most part in the presence of the people they loved, and sometimes, like in Danica's case, in their mother and father's arms. That leaves a lasting impression on those of us who go on living, and it changes anyone's perspective on and relationship with death. As I packed up my camera gear and tripods and drove home from this emotional interview, I couldn't help but wonder at some folks' callousness and inability to see outside themselves. Audrey told me that some people asked her questions that seemed to me like they were seeking to place Danica's fate into their own narratives and political views. They asked Audrey if Danica was vaccinated or what their family diet was like, obviously implying that those things and other things could have been the cause of her childhood brain cancer. I thought about the roughly 600,000 people who die of cancer every year in this country, and their families and their stories, and the weird slights and indignities that they've had to endure. I've thought about the overlapping and sometimes competing experiences of families battling cancer and those battling COVID over the last year. While Danica was in the hospital, only one adult could be with her at any given time, and her brothers could not visit her because of COVID protocols. And I thought of the people who died alone of COVID right here at Central Washington hospitals and across the nation. They had to say goodbye to their friends and family over an iPad. Were the unintended consequences of some of our systemic responses to COVID inhumane? We're still so close to it that I don't think we can answer that question yet, but it's one worth asking now and in the future. What we do know is that those protocols affected folks like the Taylor family mentally and emotionally. I'd like to thank Audrey and the Taylor family for sharing Danica's story. I hope that it leads to a greater understanding of childhood cancer, because it's not something that just happens in other towns and regions. It's right here. And just a few episodes ago, I covered Avery's Army and what students at Westside High School did to raise money to support the Patton family and their daughter Avery, who is a 5th grader at John Newberry in Wenatchee, who's also battling cancer. If you would like to support the Taylor family, I've included links in the show notes of this episode so you can do that. I'm also including a link so folks can donate to advance pediatric brain cancer research, and you can do so in Danica's honor. Also, if you would like to get involved with and support local organizations that help kids like Danica in our community, check out Wellness Place, the Brave Warrior Project, and the Mia Ledbetter Foundation. There are links to each of those organizations' websites in the show notes as well. And you can find them by going to NCWLIFE.com and finding the full episodes tab at the top of the home screen. Once you do, scroll down to find Common Sense with Dominick Bonny. This is episode 34. Join me next time as we take a deep dive into the movement to advance revisionist history and how the backlash to acknowledging historical events like the Tulsa Massacre, Juneteenth, the Trail of Tears, and the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II is fueling a movement to replace American history with nationalist nostalgia. That's next time on Common Sense.
At D.A. Davidson in Wenatchee, they believe your investment success begins with a personalized plan. A plan that is the roadmap you need to navigate your way to living your best years in retirement. D.A. Davidson can help you create a plan so you can take the time to enjoy the finer things in life. Let the financial advisors at D.A. Davidson help chart your retirement future today.
Kids are resilient. I just love their energy. They bounce back so quickly. I love the stories they tell. I love just their charisma, their character. I love to see that subtle smile that you pull out of a kid, you know, when you start talking with them about something they really like. I just love what I do, and I can't imagine I would be as happy doing anything else.
I'm Sean Smith, and you're watching the NCWLIFE channel.